Charles City County, Mr. Patterson.
Present.
Chesterfield County, Mr. Hollins. Goochland County, Mr. Lyle.
Yes, I'm here.
Hanover County, Mr. Davis. Henrico County, Vice Chair Rogic.
Here.
New Kent County, Mr. Moyer.
Here.
Powhatan County, Mr. Kinney. And City of Richmond, Chair Newbill.
Here.
Thank you. We do have a quorum.
Thank you. If you would, please look at the meeting agenda. And like to hear if there are any amendments that you would like to have a secretary. No? Seeing none, doesn't appear, but have we any indication of desire by anyone for public comment, whether present or virtual?
We have not received any requests.
Okay, thank you. Then let's move on to the approval of meeting minutes. The allergy, even though the rain happened, still has me. So I apologize in advance for sounding like a frog. So the March 6th minutes are page 4, the April 3rd minutes, page 6, if you would review those. And then I'll entertain a motion.
Do we need two motions or
You could do it as a block or singly.
Okay.
So move to approve the minutes.
Okay,
Second.
thank you. We don't need to do a voice. Just, I mean, individual,
Just a voice vote. is
Yeah.
fine, not a-
all those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. We'll move now to the secretary's report.
Thank you. Good morning. Just a couple of items to talk through this morning. From a compliance perspective, just wanted to let everyone know that since the last TPO and executive committee meeting, we've initiated, we initiated, or it was initiated, a Title VI compliance review. And so we submitted the documentation that was requested by the State Department of Transportation's Title VI Compliance Division earlier this month. And so we're just awaiting the feedback from that. It's a remote review. And then after they look at all the documentation that was requested, they'll follow up with any recommendations or additional guidance. I will share that as part of our submission, we noted that we are seeking guidance from the compliance division to help us update our Title VI plan to be in conformance with the newest federal guidance. And so I'm looking forward to that. And also have posed an inquiry to, I think it actually probably is central office with regard to our contracts for the administration of the MPO funding for the next fiscal year. So that we can understand from a contractual perspective, what about Title VI are we subject to compliance? There's in the standard language that we typically have for our grant agreement, there's reference to executive orders that have been rescinded. So we just are asking for some additional guidance on that so that we can understand the expectations on us for next fiscal year. In addition to that, we have an equity work group that you all have heard about before, and that I'll talk about also in a moment, but who's continuing to meet. That group is membered by representatives or members of the CTAC and the Commission's Public Outreach and Engagement Committee. And that sort of joint working group has been focused on the compensation policy that's coming before the meeting later today. But also their current activity is assisting staff in the review of the Title VI plan. So they're actually scheduled to meet next on Friday morning in a virtual meeting, and then we'll set the schedule for the summer. The goal is to bring the Title VI plan amendments back to the policy board and the commission board for action and approval at your next meetings in August and September. So just kind of an update about where we are on that. Any questions on Title VI or, and I'm sorry, I was speaking in shorthand. Is this what you were gonna ask me? Apologize.
I
What
was
is
going to
it?
ask a question and I publicly embarrass myself frequently by acknowledging, I don't have lots of detail on Title
Yeah,
VI. My
I
mind keeps going to
apologize.
Title IX, which I know is
Yeah.
sports, and so.
I'm so sorry. I don't know why I was talking in that shorthand. Title VI is the Title VI of the United States Civil Rights Act, amended as of 1964. And so of 1964 and then subsequently as amended.
All right.
It is the prevailing guidance for recipients of federal funds and how they must administer the programs to ensure non-discrimination
Okay.
in the administration. So for us as a funding recipient of federal funds, it kind of affects three sort of core activities of our work. Public participation, so our attempt to reach the whole community and the outreach that we do for members of the public to get engaged in the planning work that we do. It's also relevant to our employment practices and our purchasing practices. And so our Title VI plan is a document that's required to be submitted and on record. For any grantee recipient of federal funds, you must have a Title VI plan, and it is the guide for how, in our case, how we comply with the provisions with regard to those three sort of core activities.
Okay, and I appreciate that.
Yeah.
Of course, my mind's thinking that either you comply or don't, and it sounds like we're looking at options of how we comply. So,
As far as the compliance review,
yes, ma'am.
I would think about it sort of like an audit or like a kind of a testing that they do. And so they ask for information, documentation of our purchasing activities. And so they ask for, it's a 3-year compliance review. So for the last 3 years, they ask for record keeping from us. It's kind of a sample of contracts. Did we have the right contract language incorporated into those documents? What's the makeup and mix of the vendors that we selected as far as from a non-discrimination perspective? Are they representative, so to speak, of the community that we serve? There were questions included about the demographic makeup of our staff, and there were questions with regard to our public outreach and engagement activities. Who do we reach out to? How do we ensure that we are reaching communities across the region? And I believe that there were also some questions with regard to a related set of provisions around the Americans with Disabilities Act as well.
Okay.
So it's kind of like a testing. You said you were going to do this. This is the law. You said you were going to do these things. Show us evidence that you did those things.
And for my fellow board members, you're welcome, because I know some other people were thinking, man,
Yeah.
I'm happy to take the bullet.
Yeah, I appreciate that because I sort of started in the middle there instead of at the beginning. So thank you. Also from a compliance activities update, we are reviewing at the staff level the bylaws just to sort of do an administrative review of that, making sure that, again, as we prepare for recertification in 2025, later this year, we're expecting that to be initiated. Just to make sure that everything is consistent with our actions, or again, are we doing what we say we do, and that kind of thing. So I wanted to, with the handout that you have, go through a couple of things that we've identified that we think might be appropriate for amendments for the bylaws. And again, these would come back to you at your next meeting in a more formal manner to review a marked up version, but just thought for purposes of the conversation this morning, we could talk through some things. So if you move to page 3, that's Article 3, Section 2 on the voting membership. Staff would propose that the policy board consider adding the CVTA as a voting member. This would bring them to be in a consistent membership status with the Capital Region Airport Commission, GRTC, RMTA, Secretary of Transportation. And so if that was something that the group were willing to do, the impact of that would be that the total votes would be moved up to 29 from 28. Excuse me, 28 from 27. 5 of those voting members would be non-locality, so we would still maintain a fairly significant proportion of membership coming from and voting membership coming from the jurisdictions. So you can see sort of on that table how that might look if we were to add CVTA.
Now that is different than the Commonwealth Secretary? Do
The Commonwealth, yes,
we
so
normally have a representative from?
yeah, Mr. Totten is his
Mr. Totten.
appointee.
Oh, the VDOT,
From
okay,
VDOT,
okay,
yes.
this is the VDOT, okay,
Yes.
that's the VDOT vote, okay,
Yes.
very good.
And I will note, since you brought that up, another suggestion that we have is that in previous recertification reviews, there has been a concern raised. It has not been escalated to the level of a finding, but a concern raised about our membership compensation related to how the state departments are participating in the MPO governance. The way as you can see, the way our bylaws read, it's the Commonwealth of Virginia Secretary of Transportation, and we need to correct this, but the language should say or their designee.
Okay.
That's what it says. It just is cut off on the text and the print. For some time, and Mr. Riblett might be able to help me with this, the VDOT representative has typically been the secretary's appointee. The concern that was raised in our last federal certification was that DRPT doesn't have a similar place in the governance. As you all know, we regularly, almost every meeting, we have representation from DRPT, and Ms. Tran or Mr. Hudson are oftentimes here and invited to give reports in our meeting and have that dialogue, but it's been flagged as a concern. And so one option might be that still maintaining that the authority of this position sits with the Secretary of Transportation. And so it may be that we just could add a footnote indicating that the secretary actually includes more than those two agencies in the portfolio of departments, and that it is expected that the representative that the secretary appoints is speaking for the secretary and that entire portfolio. Mr. Riblett, I don't know if you have a comment about that, but.
Yeah, so historically, we will always make sure that if there's any vote that comes before this committee or this board, that we are speaking on behalf of all agencies that the secretary represents. So I'll use an example down at Tri-Cities a number of years ago. There was an issue that certainly UDOT did not have any involvement in, but DRPT did, and we voted accordingly the way DRPT was interested in having that vote go. So we work very hard behind the scenes to make sure that the votes that are cast are representative of the secretary's office.
And I guess I'll just say, I think in my tenure here, we have enjoyed a very strong partnership with our state agencies in moving through the recertification process. And I think that I have not heard that there's a strong interest from DRPT to want to have a voting seat on the policy board. I think we would be very amenable to recommending that at the staff level if that were the case. But the communication that I have been a part of over the years on this item is that the way that it works right now works very well. And the DRPT is not interested in pursuing a dedicated seat. So that's why I'm suggesting maybe we just write some clarifying language to demonstrate that the secretary's portfolio is inclusive of these departments, as opposed to just adding more seats to the board that creates more for everybody.
But can we add a footnote that would delineate those entities that
We
make
could.
up?
Yes,
I
that's,
think one of the, if I may, I think one of the things that causes the confusion is the fact that they're designated particularly as a non-voting member in the section 3 there. So if we were to modify that and simply provide a listing of the agencies that the secretary represents up in section 2, perhaps it might be more clear that it's not that DRPT is non-voting, it's that their vote is through the secretary, as we understand.
the same could be made with the Department of Aviation.
That's correct.
Mhm.
Yeah, so rather than designating them as non-voting.
So maybe we could work with you, Mr. Gregory, to more clearly communicate that representation and how those
Absolutely.
agencies are integrated into the process.
Yes, ma'am.
That makes sense.
So similarly, I think with the membership structure that's now been formed and well established with the CVTA, staff is curious if there's a desire to want to add the Virginia Port Authority as a non-voting member for the TPO. They are of the same in the CVTA structure, and so it seemed like as a partner in the region and kind of from a consistency perspective, we thought that it might be appropriate again to invite them. They might not always have the resources to send someone to a meeting, but it would be a way to make sure that that connectivity is there. And then on that last line under the non-voting membership section, you just note that we think it might be more clear to say that it's the CTAC chair as opposed to the committee as a whole. So.
Do you need to get a rate from us in terms of the Port Authority addition?
Yeah, any read on any of this would be helpful to us so that we can get a sense of anything we need to incorporate into recommended changes.
I mean, I think it would be important to include the port. I'm not sure what others are. We're talking about transportation and all modes, connectivity.
Madam Chair, I guess I'm little gooseling whenever they come up with things. My first question is, what problem are we solving? And so is there a problem here that we're not getting input or communication or connectivity with folks?
Yeah, I don't-
With doing this,
Sure.
I'm gonna use the word force, require or otherwise improve that. I get, is there a problem? I guess is what I'll ask.
I would not say that there's a problem. I think that even in our Unified Planning Work Program, we identify that, we really are moving into more of a multimodal planning for the region. And with the presence of the Port Authority here in Richmond with the Port of Richmond, it is a significant part of our modes of transportation for which we plan. And so when we look at the players and the stakeholders and the modes that we support, that is a gap that isn't represented.
Well, I'm reading the wall. Failure to plan is planning to fail. So I mean, in a sense, we're forward looking on this. And so I appreciate that being a reason or an anticipated situation. I don't want to call it a problem. And that's helpful for me. Thank you.
Yes.
Doctor, yeah, anytime that I know a new Kent can get any kind of input from Port of Virginia, we'd love to have it. You're gonna see that the same thing, all the stuff coming to Amazon eventually. You're gonna wanna know, a lot of stuff is going on.
Well, it's going to come through. Well, maybe
Yeah,
not
it's
so
gonna
much
come through us,
anymore.
it's
Come
gonna
through
go to
the
you,
year.
but they've been good partners already with us for a number of our projects.
And for me, as we talk about multimodal, I mean, having all forms and all entities represent to really have that come together is going to be critical.
Yeah, I read the wall. I mean, I think it's forward looking.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, if we don't plan, then we may have an issue.
Just one follow-up question. Are they invited to the meetings currently or they just don't feel welcome? I'm just curious if they're,
I think
I don't
they're in our
remember them being
interested
here.
parties list. And we have a really good staff to staff working relationship. So it might be that if there's an openness to invite, you could suss out whether there's a desire to have a dedicated seat,
That's true.
I think what we wouldn't want to do is update the bylaws, inform them that the bylaws have been updated. Now they have to fill the seat and then they're absent regularly.
Right, that's, my point, yeah.
But I do think that with our virtual capabilities, it might be possible for someone to be, yeah, exactly.
We didn't have that.
Madam Chair,
Yes.
the port isn't taking any umbrage that we keep canceling our tour, are they?
Well, I was gonna go to, we have to revisit our door at some point as well. I don't
Yeah,
think so.
we
right?
know, and that they've been great.
We ask them to the prom and then don't show up.
I think they actually canceled on us.
Oh, well, okay.
Yeah. For legitimate reasons. Okay.
And the CVTA was mentioned also, and I know we have been very appreciative of the efforts of the CVTA. And of course, they all come under Plan RVA. How is our relationship right now? I know they control the money in many respects, because we've been very appreciative of the funding sources there. So it would be their chair who would be the voting member, or would it be a non-voting member?
The CVTA would determine who they would like to appoint to serve as the voting member
A
on the
voting
policy
member,
board.
okay.
I think it would be up to the CVTA to decide whether they wanted that to be a member of the authority, of
course.
which I recognize some of you around this table already are that, or if you would like if they would like their executive director, Mr. Parsons, to serve in that role. So
It'll be up to them.
it's a similar thing, I will say with GRTC, there are people who serve on the TPO who also serve on the board of directors for GRTC. I don't think RMTA right now, but it has happened in the past. But the practice has been that the executive director or another staff designee serves as the representative from those organizations as opposed to a governing board member. But it would be the prerogative of the authority. And I'll let Mr. Davis speak to any concerns as to relationship. I'm not aware of any issues relationship wise between the TPO and the CBTA at present.
What time? No, we're good right now. So in the voting membership, the CBTA would get a vote then?
That's how we've
That's
thought
what,
about it currently.
Okay, that's
So,
in addition to what's on here.
right.
I would take it to 28.
I would prefer to be the executive director.
Okay.
Because, you know, as one of the little voters here, Capital Regional Airport is already, that's a Enrico. GRTC is Richmond, Enrico, and Chesterfield, and Richmond Metropolitan Transportation is Enrico, Richmond, and Chesterfield. So that's votes for them, okay, that could be their way. I wouldn't want to have another one added to
Understood.
that, okay? To be transparent.
Madam Chair,
yes,
you're saying the voting member would be, you prefer that it be the executive director of the CVTA?
Yes.
Where's my executive director? I would prefer to have a discussion on that.
Okay.
From a foundational standpoint, nothing to do with the current executive director.
Right.
But voting, my baseline is, and I recognize we have voting members that are not elected. And I understand that, but I'd want to have a discussion about whether a voting member on TPO should be someone who, from the CBTA, if that authority could be delegated to the executive director, if the commission would find, if the authority would find that appropriate. Discussion, but just a discussion point and see what their
Okay.
thoughts would be before. And then also, I don't know that we could turn around and say, we would want your executive director, you don't get to decide. And I know that wasn't the intent, but that's something we can bring up. Just over biscuits
Yeah.
on.
Mr.
Thanks,
Roger.
Rodney.
There's a follow-up question, but how does GRTC do it?
Yeah.
Does GRTC make the decision or are we making the decision for GRT? Because
We do
Well,
not
then-
make the decision. Just like the localities, we have a seat for the entity. The entity decides who the individuals are who will represent the entity. So just like your boards decide who among your local boards are coming to represent the counties or the city.
I would say, offer, we would be consistent in our practice,
That's. I like
by
that.
having that be a determination of that
Right,
entity,
right, okay.
yeah. But I would just offer.
Yeah, our decision could be
Yes.
the director, but that would be CBTA's decision.
Yes, sir.
Okay, that's good, that's good.
Typically, it would be the chair of your body or their designee. So the designee could be the executive director, or it could be some other. board
Vice
member,
chairs.
Vice chairs.
Sure.
Okay, great. The next one kind of for discussion, I think I'm glad that there are some folks from localities and from the state in the room. If you go to Article 5, Section 3, the bylaws and in item 2, item B there, they indicate that the agenda will be transmitted 10 days prior to the next meeting. Of course, from a transmittal perspective now, we do that electronically, and so it's posted on our website and then an email comes out. So that's from a day count perspective, we meet on the first Thursday of the month typically, and so the prior Monday is that 10-day count backwards. I think the question for sort of the group is that appropriate and practical for you all to have adequate time to review the contents of the meeting agendas, to do the conference that you may need to do with professional staff and that kind of a thing? I know that many of the localities have an internal review process that they need time to be able to turn around information. And at the same time, with the attempt to juggle meeting calendars and making sure that we have meetings that are substantive and worthwhile agendas. And at least in the last 2 years, I'll say, it's been harder to negotiate meeting that 10-day posting timeline with tip amendments and the timing that things need to happen. And so I think we're just trying to validate that if everyone is working hard to meet that 10-day post deadline, is that necessary to work that hard? I mean, just candidly. Because if it's not, then it would probably be helpful to the parties involved in putting the packets together, because it is a team effort sometimes between localities, our GRTC partners, our state partners, to make sure that the content for tip amendments in particular is ready to go. And so I think that there's I don't want to say tension, but there's a trade-off, because if we have fewer meetings, it's really crucial that the timing of the material gets into the packet at the right time. And so we don't have as much flexibility if a deadline is missed to meet a meeting packet and we don't meet it. In this example, we're meeting today and the next scheduled meeting isn't until August. And so we don't want to miss a deadline for a tip amendment that needs to happen today, because we lose 3 months on that project. So I think we're just trying to kind of get a sense of how much time do you need to review packets. And from staff in the room, I know you all play a big role in that. So I don't want to put you on the spot.
Mind commenting, if that would be all right. So just as a TAC member, if 10 days is helpful. So let's say this is a Thursday meeting, the Monday last week, we get the TPO agenda. So I review it as a TAC member, coordinate with Mr. Rogish and Reverend Cooper on just like what our Rex TAC recommendations were, or if there's new agenda items to be able to catch up with them. The 10 days is helpful, maybe 7 days at minimum, but the 7 days or 10 days is helpful, but 7 days would be the lowest I would want to go, just to prepare. Like we prepare the Henrico County, like a TPO letter that goes to our county manager for signature, to brief our board members. So at least 7 days, but the 10 days works well. And I understand there can always be amendments to the agenda later, and I don't want to hold up the process, but Barb, do you?
I have similar work that happens in Chesterfield as well. We take a look at the agenda and brief our board members or our representatives at TPO. Yeah, I shrinking it a little, it's probably all right. And then maybe making some concessions here and there for special circumstances. But yeah, definitely wouldn't want to shrink it too tight, because we wouldn't have a time to review and brief.
I mean, I'm sorry to get into the details of this with a policymaking group, but the challenge is that with a Monday post date, we strive to really have everything done on Friday. And so then it really means that by Wednesday, the Wednesday prior, we need the material, and it just, from a practicality perspective, it makes it hard sometimes. And so I like the idea of maybe just being able to ensure that for consistency, it's 10 days as it's written in the packet, but when that's not possible, we figure out a different solution.
Maybe it could be when you've got one item that is a holdup, maybe in the agenda you note that, provide the information you can about it, and then note that you're still working on it, and we'll send something by something.
Okay, so I want to make sure I'm
Be
hearing
flexible with 8
correctly.
days or 7 days. I think that's the
Say 8.
Yeah, so again, I'm trying to make sure what we have here and that I'm hearing correctly. Somewhere between 7 and 10 days is sounding like what might work best to address the concerns that are being raised. Is that accurate?
Yeah, I think, I mean, we're just trying to make sure that obviously it's most helpful to everybody when the materials for a meeting are published with advance ability to review. And we know that review requires consultation with various parties. And you all have busy schedules, so we want to accommodate that. And at the same time, I think we want to make sure that when we do publish an agenda, it's as complete as possible so that we're not producing slip sheets. I mean, we don't want that to be the norm. And so I think we're trying to figure out what's the right way to approach this so that we have a standard that we regularly meet that's acceptable to everybody.
Madam Chair, I mean, as an end user, the 10 days working fine with Goochland. You brought an element into it that we wouldn't know about, I wouldn't know about unless you mentioned it. That is, it's really Wednesday, not Friday, so that you can hit Monday. And I am not a time management or time motion study. I don't know how to solve that problem. I did hear, and I like the idea that if something extraordinary comes up, we can amend the agenda to consider that if it isn't completely disclosed. But we're a much smaller county. I don't have staff. I don't have anybody. I have adult supervision today. I guess I'll say. So the 10-day works well for Goochland. I'll just leave it at that.
So is there a recommendation?
It's actually just a question for discussion. I think it's one of those things, as an advocate for my staff, I feel like I wanted to bring it up in a casual way. Just to say, if 10 days is helpful, that's great. And we will continue to strive to meet that. If everybody's like, yeah, I don't even look at the packet until the Friday before, then it would be like, well, why are we all working so hard to meet a deadline that no one appreciates? And if you appreciate the 10 days, we will continue to.
Every other board, I don't look for it until 7 days ahead schedule. For our board, for CPTA. So I didn't even look for this, until last Thursday. So thanks for working hard Monday or Friday before, but I don't need 10 days. And also we have in the agenda, we have a consideration for amendments.
Yeah.
The agenda in there, so I don't want to be surprised by something huge, but if we forget something in those 3 days difference, it can always be brought up and added to the agenda.
What about other members?
From listening to staff, at least in Henrico and Chesterfield, I would be fine bringing it down to 8 days or so, but giving us a little bit of time beforehand would be helpful. So I don't know if a couple of days helps Ms. Schickel, from a Wednesday, 2 more days gives you the weekend, maybe that does help you. So meeting somewhere in the middle around 8 days would be okay with Henrico.
Yeah, 8 days is fine with Charles City as well. Is it a strain on staff?
8 days would be
It's
less.
not a strain on staff. It is challenging at times. And it's not every meeting. It's hard to know, and Miles, I'll let you kind of speak to this more if you want to, but it's hard to know whether the trend of the last 12 or so months is an anomaly or is here to stay. We've just had a lot of, I'll call it emergency things that need to happen. I think it's in large part because of this change in how federal funds are flowing to localities for transportation projects. I mean, Sharon, I'm looking at you to kind of and I don't think that this is a fault of anybody. It's just the reality that decisions have had to be made a lot more quickly. And so we're just trying to make sure that our systems aren't creating the problem, and instead are solving the problem. And so I don't think I'm flagging it as this is a huge burden for staff, but again,
That 8 days will be helpful.
8 days would be great, yeah. If it doesn't, we don't wanna get flexibility on our part, but then squeezes other people. That's not the goal, so.
8 days is fine.
Yeah, I think that'll work.
Everyone, members?
You, Jody.
Okay.
We appreciate you all, thank you. Okay.
Man.
Okay, Article 6 and voting. This is another section that I think just is something that when you read it, it makes sense, but then the reality of practice. So if you'll bear with me, again, this is sort of more of the staff advocacy item. And I think Mr. Gregory, you can help me speak to this a bit, but I think that the intent here is to be able to create as much flexibility for localities to ensure that representation occurs at every meeting. And we know that schedules are busy, and so the ability to have alternates is very helpful for many of you, so that if you can't be here, it's not that the locality just loses their votes at the table. At the same time, I know that there are a number of instances where some of you might say at the beginning of the policy board meeting, you know, do we have quorum? And we have to literally go through, because in some of the jurisdictions, and I'll use Chesterfield as an example, some members carry 2 votes and some members carry 1. So we can't just count heads in the room and determine that. So it's not a complaint and it's not a problem, but I think I'm just trying to bring awareness to everyone that this is why Janice has to go through the spreadsheet that she uses and call the roll really to confirm, because if we count it, you carry 2 votes, if I'm not mistaken, Mr. Moyer, and so
Yeah.
I can't just.
Just go by one.
And with apologies, I'll just confess, I do not have everyone's number of votes that they carry committed to memory. So I can't look and just go around the room and know that,
Janice.
you know, and then the way that some localities have appointed their members, Mr. Davis, this isn't the way that it happens for Hanover County, but if, for example, Ms. Pritchard is not here for the 9:30 meeting, there are some localities who would say, well, then if she's not here, Mr. Davis gets to carry her vote. So again, we can't just count noses and be able to determine those kinds of quorums. And so the system is not broken and it's not working, but we want to raise the fact that in the effort to bring that flexibility to you all to ensure that the counties and city and town are represented. There's some effort that goes into tabulating that. Janice pointed out to me in sections 4 and 5 that in actuality, and you'll look at section 5, that second half of that paragraph, in conducting such votes called upon by the secretary, members would announce the number of votes they are casting. We don't actually do that now. So Mr. Moyer, in your example, you don't actually say, you know, that counts for 2, right? And so I think we're trying to figure out how do we either bring our practices into consistency, compliance with the bylaws, or is that necessary? Do you all want to know? I mean, I see you're kind of surprised, Mr. Lyle. You might not have been aware that an individual is carrying multiple votes. And so
I am.
So I think I'm curious, and this is sort of a point of discussion, should it be made more transparent? Should we be putting the voting tool, for example, on the screen when votes are happening? I mean, logistically, what would you like to see happen? If it's not necessary and everybody's happy with the way that it's been happening, then we probably should, from a consistency perspective, strike that section. So I apologize. We don't really have a position one way or another, but when we review this and we say, oh, we are not doing something that is called for in the bylaws, we want to flag it for you. And this might be something that we don't get full consensus on today, but it's just something that I think we want to make sure is as clear as possible.
I can't recall a time having a challenge with this. And folks knowing how many votes they're carrying, but maybe I've missed it.
We generally, the votes of this board are unanimous. It's just a situation where, particularly if there are 2 members and there are 2 alternates, and it's not always clear. There are so many varying situations. If 2 alternates are present, but none of the members, or if 1 alternate, does that alternate get the vote of 1 member or both members? And so if we ever did have a contested vote or action,
Sure.
I'm gonna be crying, because I almost feel like we need a form that says, you know, this, and it would have to be updated whenever there was a member change. Dr. Newbill is the member, her alternate is this person. This person is the member, and if this, then that. That's where, again, it doesn't come up very often, but should it ever come up, I'm not sure that I could. There may be a situation where I couldn't certify a vote.
There's somewhat a responsibility of us to make sure our alternate is there and knows what the voting is. Like, I can't make the next meeting, but I've already contacted my alternate and she'll get 2 votes. if we do anything. So that, I would think that'd be true in the Henrico case where if you're carrying 4 votes, your alternate would then also carry 4 votes. Or if only 2 votes, that they know they got, 2 votes. Because like Janice said, we could come under a situation where we don't agree on something.
And in that case, it would have to be, I mean, honestly, I can think of a couple situations where if there were a split vote, we may have to say, we'll have to consult with legal counsel and determine later what the actual vote is. It's just some uncertainties in some of the alternate designations, how many votes they carry,
Okay,
things like that.
so how do you want to proceed with this? Do you want to bring something back to recommend based on? Or,
I think,
because we're not gonna have.
yeah,
time to
so
do
so one
all the
option,
logistics.
as Janice suggested, it might be just clarity in the appointment notifications. And so Janice has built a really great relationship with the clerks from around the region. And so we could work with the clerks to just create a form that more clearly tells us who plays which
Okay.
role and the allocation of votes. And I don't know that it necessarily means anything has to be changed in this section if we just improve our practices and communication.
One follow-up question. If for quorum, do the votes count for quorum? So if Henrico has 4 total votes and I'm the only one here today, does that count for 4 for quorum?
If you've assigned it that way.
If we've assigned it that way.
So as we understand the way that Henrico made the appointments currently, you are carrying the 2 that were assigned to you. And if Mr. Cooper's not here this morning, as I know he's
Yeah.
not planning to be, those 2 would be absent unless Mr. Schmidt came in his place.
Yeah, that's
I think
helpful to know.
What's not sort of clear here, and Mr. Gregory would have to advise, is does Henrico have the ability to say, in lieu of calling in the alternate to represent Mr. Reverend Cooper's votes, can the present member carry? And that's the uncertainty that we don't know.
And
So-
and then the second question, I guess, like for Hanover County, they have 2 members with 3 votes. So is one designated to have 2 votes and one with 1 vote? Okay.
Right.
And so same thing, if he's here, we don't know for sure if she can vote, if he can vote for her, et cetera. Okay.
Hence my
Okay.
phone calls, Sid's in my outreach to many of you over the last 24 hours, asking so that we could literally go through the voting tool and see, do we have enough to do the business of the morning based on what we
Right.
heard were gonna be certain scheduling challenges.
Okay, so there is a form that that's.
I think we can,
Is
I
that-
have not, but I
Oh,
can.
okay.
Right.
No, I wasn't trying to give assignment or whatever way you want to bring that back so we can get clarification
Yeah.
and I
and
think
agreement, that's all.
I'll look at our TAC members. I mean, it might be that we work with TAC to sort of make some recommendations about from an attendance and, I don't know if localities would have a position, but I mean, it would seem reasonable that, again, I apologize for putting you on the spot, Mr. Gersh, but in the example of Henrico today, it would seem like it would be easiest for everybody if you could just carry the 4 votes. But that's not really how we understand the appointment to have occurred. So we could just come back and say, like, is this, practically speaking, would you be okay if this is how it worked? And the same could happen for,
Right, for Richmond, for
Yeah.
any that has multi,
do
Votes,
you
so-
wanna,
Sorry, Sharon with Henrico. So as a TAC member, I thought we went through this about 2 years ago with how to designate this, but I think if Henrico was to write a letter to clarify, I would have to look through our records for the past 2 years. But my understanding was like if, Reverend Cooper wasn't here and Mr. Rogish was, he would carry all the votes
Right.
for Henrico, was my understanding. So,
Sorry.
and I thought we had
That's fine.
clarified this 2 years ago, but I'm happy to look through our records or if we need to refresh a letter. But I get an understanding that every locality may handle it differently, but that's my understanding from Henrico.
I think you're right. We did, but then the communication doesn't necessarily trace that. And so, and I can't speak specifically whether Henrico's did or didn't trace that, but I think just globally with the 9 localities, the way that the letters come in, it's always, frankly, it's not always a letter. It's just an email sometimes that says, here's your people. And we don't have any idea what the intention was. So I think we just want to, if we could create a form that very explicitly was filled out to answer the questions, and I think we'd know what to do and we wouldn't be guessing.
Well, why don't we look at doing that?
Okay.
And
Maybe for
getting,
TAC.
yes.
Maybe they could review it at the next TAC meeting and we could bring it
I-
back.
I'll let you all figure out where it could be joined, whichever way you want to proceed, but that we would have something that what I've been operating on in practice, if I'm the only one here, I'm carrying all four. If I have another member, but to have that codified, I think will be important.
Madam Chair, if I may, I would certainly recommend that it go to the TAC for their consideration.
I'm not saying don't go. I'm
Oh,
just
yeah,
saying
and-
whatever way you want to proceed. I didn't want to dictate how.
Oh, absolutely,
Yeah.
but one of the things that we've struggled with over the years is, you have all the member organizations, many of whom have more than one vote, have alternates, all the things we've been discussing. And localities naturally want to make sure that they have the authority to cast all the votes. And they don't lose that authority just because, only one member is present, so that. But there's also the situation where you have members from a local governing body member who maybe have a divergence of opinion on how a vote should go, right? So you could have an alternate who's representing a member who has a different view on how a vote should go on something. So you have that tension in the background going on all the time within the member jurisdictions. Not all the time, but often, sometimes. And so we're trying to satisfy multiple desires and it gets kind of messy. So
Okay.
we're trying to do the best we can to make sure that localities are represented as they want to be represented. And also respecting, that these are oftentimes political decisions.
Sure.
And subject to those kinds of pressures. So having a forum would be helpful. And so it's clear so that the staff of the body is not caught in, as Janice described, a situation that might result in potentially worse.
It's clear
So-
to me that I hear the challenge, and that's why I'm saying definitely bring something back, which I'm not gonna drive. If it's TAC, I'm gonna let you all work through that and bring something back that, addresses the concerns that have been raised.
Thank you.
Madam Chair, just point of
Yes, Mr. Brown.
information, the whole quorum question, is it based on locality or votes? How do we determine a quorum?
Section 2, Article 5.
Oh, well,
Article 5, Section 2 defines a quorum. And it states a quorum shall exist when a majority of the votes allocated to voting member organizations are represented by members or alternates at the
Okay.
meeting.
answer that, thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Lau. Okay.
Okay, last one, and I think I think I have a recommendation on this one. I just want to flag for members on page 9, the top of the page starts with section 4, Community Transportation Advisory Committee. We've had a lengthy set of conversations with the CTAC about their role in the MPO planning process and the business and the way that it conducts. To be clear, the succession of an agenda item doesn't go through a linear process where it goes from, say, CTAC to the TAC to the policy board. The CTAC and TAC right now structurally are kind of on parallel with each other. And so, as you can imagine, technical issues come through the TAC and come with a recommendation to the policy board. And CTAC seldom recommends things because the TAC is handling that kind of business. And the CTAC recommendations are less frequent and more in the vein of informing the policy board of the position of our community stakeholder organizations and members of the public. So it comes with kind of that type of influence, I'll call it. And so typically those things happen with regard to our public engagement plan, our Title VI plan work that's happening right now, those types of things. CTAC members, individual members, have indicated that they would like to play a larger role in the actual technical planning work. And so we're trying to negotiate how we accomplish that to be respectful of the expertise of the members of that body. Many of those people are people that you all have appointed, and we want to make sure that we're using their expertise the best way, and also negotiating the meeting flow and structure. And so I just want to flag for you that CTAC membership have expressed a desire to want to have a discussion amongst themselves about what their charter and purpose and role could and should be. And they would like to recommend that to the policy board for consideration. And so I think that that has an opportunity to be reviewed as part of the bylaws. And so I just want to ask if you are open to the CTAC taking a look at this section, determining whether they feel like what they're doing right now meets the bylaws, if they have a point of view about any recommended changes in that role or not. And then that would be incorporated into a discussion that would come back here. I can't speak for them right now about any changes that they might make, but I want to flag for you that as recently as their last meeting, they talked about, you know, are we leveraging the expertise in the room the way that we could and should? And so it's not a recommendation to change anything, but it is a request that if you're comfortable with it, could we charge the CTAC with reviewing this section and providing feedback to you about that. And then secondarily, I will say that there is the section that speaks to the formation. Why can't I find it? The equity work group.
Last paragraph
Bottom.
before section 5.
Bottom of 10.
Thank you. We do think that that is something that needs to be reviewed and addressed as well. In light of the guidance that we have with regard to language and emphasis on diversity and inclusion. And so we'd like to engage the membership in a discussion about that to make a recommendation. We certainly do not want to step away in any way, shape, or form from our obligations and our commitment to non-discrimination. And at the same time, I think we want to make sure that this MPO is positioned to be as compliant as we possibly can be with the regulations that prevail for the organization.
So, members, I would certainly, yes, Mr. Moyer.
I'm looking at Article 7, Section 3, that I gather that is a similar chart that would be there, like we have for the voting. One vote for each.
Yes, the technical advisory membership, it's a 1-to-1 vote for those bodies that are
Okay.
listed.
Okay. So, okay. I definitely want to hear, but I would definitely be open to hearing back from CTAC in terms of set of recommendations relative to this item and the equity work group and members.
Open, yeah, still our decision.
Yes, oh, absolutely.
Yep.
Others?
I rely on committees to do the heavy lifting, so
Okay.
they give me guidance.
And Mr. Davis, Mr. Patterson. You all would be good with that. You can invite. Yes, I'm fine. Okay.
Okay, we almost made it through. Yeah,
Mhm.
so
we have 7 minutes.
from the full policy board meeting agenda, just wanted to flag, there's a pretty heavy consent agenda included. Staff is prepared to be able to modify the agenda as needed if any of the items need to be pulled from the consent agenda. So the administrative items A, B, C, D, E. If any one of those items or any of them need to be moved, they could be moved down to section C of the agenda. Items F and G could be moved to section B, and items H and I could be moved to section C. Some of these items are pretty standard. As you know, the meeting minutes and work status report are standard items that are included on our consent agenda almost monthly. The election of officers was something that we talked about at the last meeting, and both members who represent the localities who are in the rotation under the non-binding guidance documents are prepared to assume the role of chair and vice chair. And so that's why that's included on the consent agenda. The meeting schedule, we do have some updates there. I think you mentioned the potential for a tour to be rescheduled. We do have that included in the schedule as a new date for this fall. The port folks have let us know that due to security needs, we would need to constrain the list of attendees, and so the invite list would be limited to TPO policy board members. Items F and G are pretty straightforward, consistent with our regular practices to have these items be on the consent agenda for the tip amendments. And then H and I are the two items that are coming from the CTAC with regard to the establishment of this pilot program to pay a stipend to CTAC members for their attendance at those meetings. Two parts here, one, to be able to create an incentive for participation, but also to be able to test whether or not that's an effective way to boost engagement of our stakeholder partners. And then I is the accompanying attendance policy that holds members accountable for participating and engaging in the meetings.
Anything else, Ms. Shucky?
That's it.
Members,
Well, I with the.
and we have 4 minutes.
Okay, I guess I'm pulling the consent items out for discussion. The compensation part, I'm still chewing on. And again, I come back to what problem are we solving? Are people not showing up? And is it $50 a meeting? Is that going to be an incentive that all of a sudden they're going to feel motivated to participate? And what is the motivation then? Is it the $50 or the actual work? I'm disinclined to support the compensation is what I'm saying. So if it's a consent item, I don't want to vote against everything on the consent item, but
But we can pull that. and put
Okay,
that
okay.
back to regular. So when we get to a review of the agenda,
All right, so
okay?
I guess that's foreshadow.
Yeah, that's fine. Anything else? Anyone? Mr.
One,
Rogers?
real quick, on the actual schedule for next year, I do know the April 2nd, I know that, and I don't want to speak for everybody, I do know Hanover, Goochland is spring break for the majority of folks, and we had an issue this past year with attendance. I'm not suggesting we change that or anything at this point, but just as an FYI, I do know that, I know at least Goochland and the 4 other localities in the Richmond area have the spring break at the same time, so just to consider.
Might take a look. Okay.
Yeah, again,
Okay.
not for today, but
Yeah, and you'll be
Going
sure
forward.
about them, so you.
there you
help
go.
us.
Thank you.
Okay, all right.
Thank you.
Anything else? Anyone else?